Welcome to the banned and censored animations Iceberg. Like I say in all my Iceberg videos, if you don't know what an iceberg is, it's basically a tier list that starts with most known facts or ideas of any given topic, dropping all the way down to least known facts and ideas. Today's iceberg is primarily on banned and censored cartoons, and due to the length of this iceberg, I've chosen to split this one into several videos. Stick around near the end of today's video to get an update on why all my other icebergs are not yet finished. Now we can't start this iceberg off without talking about the sponsor of today's video, Brilliant. Now I'm going to be super honest, when I was approached to do this sponsorship, I really had no idea what to expect and I wasn't entirely convinced. That is until I tried it. After trying it out myself for a few days and really getting into the thick of it, I've come to the conclusion that I just wish I had this when I was in high school and in college. I admit, when I was in high school and college, I was a bit of an underachiever, and most of it came from the fact that I felt my teachers just, weren't the best. And that's where I wish Brilliant would have came in. Gone are the days of listening to your teacher ramble on, and here are the days of actual learning activities. Not only does each question have an exercise and its own little demonstration to go along with it, but if you for some reason get the question wrong, Brilliant puts in triple the effort to make sure you understand the issue before you move on. I admit the first time I tried it, I forgot I was even doing the sponsor. I just started doing problem after problem. Maybe it's my low attention span talking, but I really enjoyed all the courses that they offered. Among the many courses that they offer, the one I've been enjoying is their scientific thinking course. They have a ton of courses for any level of learner, whether you're in middle school, high school, or college. For example, in math, they have your basic pre-algebra and geometry, all the way up to statistics and calculus. Here's the entire course list that they offer. If you find yourself falling asleep in class or you just cannot focus, I'd recommend hopping on your computer or going on your phone right this second and signing up for Brilliant. Make sure to use the link in the description below or go to brilliant.org/YourEverydayTheorist. The first 200 people to use my link will get 20% off an annual subscription to Brilliant. If you're really serious about your education and just want to hit start, or you need to catch up, get started today. Thank you to Brilliant for sponsoring today's video. Without further ado, sit back and relax, and let's get into Layer 1. Layer 1 is full of very obvious censored animations. Most of these cartoons were banned due to very obvious controversial subject matter that needed to be omitted after they initially aired. 200 and 201. 200 and 201 refers to episode 200 and 201 for Comedy Central's South Park. These two episodes were based around the religious prophet of Muslim faith, Muhammad. This might not sound like a huge deal right off the bat, but we need to give some much needed backstory. Back in 2005, a Danish newspaper posted a cartoon that depicted Muhammad in a rather unflattering way. This single cartoon comic led to global riots and numerous death threats towards the paper. Now you might be thinking that reaction to that cartoon coming out is a bit much, but in Islam traditions, the Prophet Muhammad is not allowed to be depicted in any way, shape, or form. Despite these outcries from the public and all of the backlash that they got, the paper did not back down and still kept the papers out. And this is what led to the creation of episode 200 and 201. These episodes are mainly focused on censorship. The main issue that is the focal point of these two episodes is the town of South Park being put into a position where they are forced to show Muhammad uncensored to the world. The interesting part of all of this was the speech that takes place near the end of episode 201. Here is the original clip that came out on television.
But I got made fun of!
That's because there is no goo, Mr. Cruz! You see, I learned something today.
That's right. Don't you see, Gingers? That's right, friends.
You might have just watched that and assumed that those long bleeps were part of the joke. The joke here is obviously trying to mock censorship, but those bleeps you heard were actual bleeps put in by Comedy Central. The original speech done by these three characters were fully bleeped out by the higher-ups at Comedy Central, but thankfully someone out there managed to get the original scene uncensored. Here is the original episode as it was meant to be seen in all its glory.
Reiner, you said the goo machine would work, but I got made fun of!
That's because there is no goo, Mr. Cruz! You see, I learned something today. Throughout this whole ordeal, we've all wanted to show things that we weren't allowed to show. But it wasn't because of some magic goo. It was because of the magical power of threatening people with violence. That's obviously the only true power. If there's anything we've all learned, it's that terrorizing people works.
That's right. Don't you see, Gingers? If you don't want to be made fun of anymore, all you need are guns and bombs to get people to stop.
That's right, friends. All you need to do is instill fear and be willing to hurt people, and you can get whatever you want. The only true power is violence.
The team at Comedy Central felt the need to put the original bleeps in the first airing of the episode because they were afraid of getting death threats leveled against the show's creators, as well as the entire staff behind South Park. So, due to all the heat that they thought they might have gotten, they chose to bleep out the entire speech by those three characters, and thankfully, nothing ever came of it. Post 9/11 bans. This just refers to the numerous changes to cartoons that were made after the attack on the World Trade Center on September 11th. Most of the changes that were made were just removing episodes or depictions of terrorism of any sorts in any kind of cartoon. For example, there was an episode of an old Disney show called Talespin, which primarily focused on terrorism. This episode centered around the main character Baloo being told to deliver what he thinks is a gift to the leader of a neighboring country. Unbeknownst to Baloo, this present is actually a bomb that was planted in the hopes of sparking a war. This episode aired well over 10 years before the 9/11 attack, and as soon as the 9/11 attacks happened, the episode was immediately pulled. However, it was still periodically shown on Disney XD. Another episode pulled from TV was the episode of Pokemon Tentacool and Tentacruel, which depicts various scenes of buildings being destroyed by the giant Pokemon. This actually leads me to the next banned animation, Electric Soldier Porygon. There was an episode of Pokemon that aired back in December 16th of 1997, only in Japan. This episode became infamous because of how one scene caused over 700 people watching the show to suffer from epileptic seizures. This happened due to the flashing strobe effect that they used during this scene where Pikachu shoots a lightning bolt at a Porygon. What you are watching is an 80% slowed down version, so no need to worry about getting any epileptic seizures. The show actually went into a major hiatus after this episode aired, as the bad press and negative attention received was way too much for them to handle at the time. This episode of Pokemon has never been commercially released or rebroadcasted anywhere in the world, but a link to the original will be in the description below. However, I highly advise you to watch at your own risk. LGBT Representation. I'm not going to talk about this one too much because you guys will see throughout the entire Iceberg, there's kind of a lot of these censorships that happen due to gay or lesbian references being made in cartoons. Just one example that immediately popped into my head when regarding this was the episode of Arthur that took news headlines when it came out. The 22nd season premiere opened with a same-sex marriage being depicted, which notably caused a lot of controversy. A lot of people were upset because in 21 other seasons, there was no hint of LGBT, and a lot of unprogressed people just really took a disliking towards this season premiere. A ton of other shows have started doing this as well, such as Steven Universe and Adventure Time. I'm not really sure why this is in its own tier by itself, but I figured I'd talk about it. But you guys will see later down on the list that there's a lot of episodes that got banned due to LGBT representation. If this was referring to something else though, feel free to correct me in the comments. There might have been something big here that I was just too lazy to research, so please let me know in the comments. Der Fuhrer's Face. Der Fuhrer's Face is an old animated cartoon by Walt Disney that starred Donald Duck. The main focus of this film was to be an anti-Nazi propaganda film for the American war effort. This makes sense as it came out during 1943, which we should all know is during one of the years in which World War II took place. The film itself goes through the daily life of Donald Duck living under the dictatorship of Hitler. And it's not like they used a parody or a lookalike character, it's literally just Hitler. Donald wakes up and is shown being under 24/7 surveillance. Now, the really disturbing part of this video is the lengths at which Donald goes to feel normal. His morning breakfast isn't even breakfast. He grabs his coffee from this secret safe, presumably to keep it a secret from the German soldiers that would later invade his home. He sprays this bacon and egg perfume into his mouth and cuts a wooden piece of bread off for breakfast. The short is propaganda, so it's just trying its best to shove down your throat how bad the Nazi party is. Clearly here we see that even Donald just waking up and eating breakfast is somewhat of a chore. We then see Donald working in a weapons factory building these big bullets and missiles. While he's working on the conveyor belt line, he is being told to continuously say "Hail Hitler" over and over. This short ends with Donald Duck freaking out, spiraling into further madness when all of a sudden he wakes up from his dream into his normal bed in the United States. And we know he's in the United States because if his United States PJs were not enough information, he straight up says to end the entire film off, "Boy, am I glad to be inside the United States of America." I honestly really think that this film shouldn't be frowned upon. This is obviously quite offensive propaganda, but it's just one of those things that was a byproduct of the time it came out in, and to me at least, it serves as a piece of history. I wish that Disney would just acknowledge their past more often when it comes to this type of stuff instead of trying to cover it up. I doubt anyone watches this nowadays and thinks, damn, Disney must have some secret plan to brainwash us, but alas, this is on the list because Disney has tried their very best to take away any information or ban this cartoon altogether, but like everything else on the internet, it still remains on YouTube for many to view it. This brings us to Layer 2. Layer 2 involves more obscure and random reasons for censoring episodes. I would say aside from the first entry on Layer 2, most of it seems to lean away from the controversial subject matter and instead are just episodes that had some unfortunate mistakes in them. Steven Universe. You guys will see more Steven Universe on this iceberg, but just for this one part in Layer 2, Steven Universe has been no stranger to censorship over the years, most notably censored in other countries for its LGBT themes. One of the main reasons this one is on this list is because of Southeast Asia's decision to blatantly not air 5 very important episodes of the series. For an easy comparison to get this point across, I will be using the Marvel Cinematic Universe as an analogy because you don't have to watch those movies to understand what I'm about to say. Imagine someone watching the first phase of the MCU, and then all of a sudden they just stopped watching every movie until Avengers Endgame came out. If you went to the movies to go watch Avengers Endgame without knowing the entire phase 2 and 3, it would have left you very confused, obviously because you're missing a ton of information. How did we get here is the main question you'd be asking yourself. And this is how some fans of Steven Universe felt that live in Southeast Asia. There were 5 very important episodes that were just completely glossed over because of the major LGBT themes within them. With one of the episodes being primarily focused on 2 gay characters getting married, there are also smaller censored moments such as the fusion dance between Pearl and Rose. In this instance, the UK cut out a good 5 to 10 seconds of the dance because it was deemed to be too sexualized, which honestly felt like a slap in the face because there are many other sexualized moments that have remained in the show. It feels as though they just cherry pick moments that bother them and then choose to censor it. Mr. Skinnylegs. This is one of the few censored animations on the list that I felt needed to actually be censored. Mr. Skinnylegs refers to an episode of the same name of the popular kids show Peppa Pig. The main focus of this episode was on Peppa befriending this spider. This episode was banned almost immediately, but only in Australia. The reasoning for this was people did not want children to watch this episode and think that the spiders in their homes were friendly enough to befriend in the same way that Peppa did. This makes way more sense when you realize just how many dangerous spiders live in Australia and how common it is for them to find their way into any household. The episode remains banned in Australia, and I honestly feel like it's well deserved. I can totally see a kid watching the episode, seeing a spider in their room, and walking up to it thinking that it won't harm them. Rude Removal. Rude Removal is an episode of Dexter's Laboratory that, to my knowledge, was released for a short amount of time but was quickly taken off the air due to the amount of swearing insinuated in the episode. This one centered around Dexter's new invention, the Rude Removal Machine. This machine would take all of the rudeness from a person and extract it, leaving behind a genuinely nice individual. The main issues that a lot of parents had with this episode were the controversial title card, which shows Dee Dee flipping the bird and shows Dexter bare ass mooning the audience. What happens in the episode also made parents very upset. It starts off with Dexter and Dee Dee arguing about who's more rude than the other. In the midst of their fight, they end up inside the Rude Removal Machine together. The duo's rudeness gets extracted into two rude clones of themselves. These rude clones began cursing up a storm, calling their mom fat, and just causing all sorts of trouble. It's important to note that whenever the characters cursed in the original cut, it was in fact bleeped, but there does exist a version online where someone seems to have edited in the characters cursing. This one was pretty interesting, as I feel like the title card alone would not fly in today's media. If you want to watch it yourself, I'll leave a link to what I believe is the edited version below. The Loud House. There are several episodes and scenes that have been censored from the Nickelodeon show, The Loud House. One disturbing scene that caught my attention was a potential deleted scene in which one of the characters brushed their teeth too hard and their gums started bleeding. What you're watching isn't the actual scene, but a mere recreation of what it might have looked like. This one was scrapped before it came to fruition. Here's what it looked like on the original storyboard. There's also one more banned episode that I thought was pretty interesting, and it's this episode titled One Flew Over the Loud House. This episode focuses on a zombie-type virus spreading through the Loud family household. Throughout the episode, each character eventually gets the virus, and by the end of the entire thing, nearly every single person is infected. This episode was eventually taken off the air. And why, you might ask? Well, funny enough, it was because of the surgence of COVID-19. I guess Nickelodeon did not want any type of affiliation with the virus. Even in something as silly as an episode like this, they chose to take the entire episode off the air and ban it altogether. Fake Peppa Pig episodes. Those who watched my Never Search This on YouTube video should know about this entry. There are various quote-unquote episodes of Peppa Pig that can be found on YouTube, but most of them are not really official episodes. Almost all of them are fan-made and almost always involve some type of syringe or needle being stabbed into one of the characters. I find that most of these are put out with the intention of enticing little kids to click on them and traumatizing them for whatever sick reason. If you guys want to watch more stuff like this that appears on YouTube, feel free to check out that video. Man's Best Friend. Those who have watched Ren and Stimpy know that this show is no stranger to controversy, with the numerous amount of scenes that have been deemed too adult for the targeted audience of its time. So it's no wonder that one of the most infamous episodes from the series is making an appearance on a list like this. The episode Man's Best Friend centers around a man named George Liquor who adopts Ren and Stimpy as his pets. He is seen being an abusive trainer throughout the episode, which leads to a scene in which Ren beats the absolute shit out of George with a wooden paddle. This scene is what ultimately got the entire episode scrapped before it hit live TV. It was supposed to be in the second season of the show, but Nickelodeon thought it was best to shoot the idea down beforehand. And to kick a man while he was down, they even fired the creator of the episode shortly after this aired. He was actually fired for unrelated reasons, but a lot of people believed that this episode was also one of the bigger reasons as to why he was fired. Luckily for us viewers, the episode would see the light of day many years later as an episode on Spike TV's Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Show, which was a direct spin-off of the original. In fact, this episode would serve as the show's premiere. Squidward's suicide reference. In season 12 of SpongeBob, an episode titled SpongeBob in Random Land referenced an old but classic creepypasta known as Squidward's suicide. For those unfamiliar with creepypastas, they are basically old folk legend type of stories that are shared and passed along the internet as real stories. Squidward Suicide is a story that involves a made-up episode of SpongeBob titled Squidward Suicide, in which Squidward appears as this black and red-eyed creature that stares at the camera until he eventually offs himself. This story is more than a few years old now, but in 2019, there was a clear reference to this picture of Squidward thrown into this episode of SpongeBob. While Squidward is looking through these random doors, one of them opens up to a shot of his room, when suddenly, this red-eyed Squidward jump scares the audience, and it becomes clear that this is a direct copy of this version of Squidward. Now, as for why this is on this iceberg, the original scene that showed this red mist Squidward was cut out nearly 2 months after the initial airing. It was eventually replaced with this baby Squidward scene instead. It's not clear why it was cut, but I imagine it was because of how scary it might have been for a child to witness such a strange image. Stark Raving Dad. Stark Raving Dad is one of the most wholesome episodes of Simpsons, which begs the question, why has it been removed from platforms like Disney+? The main reason for this episode being banned is due to the episode being about Michael Jackson. Most of the heat from this episode came after the Leaving Neverland documentary debuted, as it raised a lot of questions regarding Michael Jackson's involvement with sexual abuse against minors. And as such, the Simpsons crew believed it was best to take the episode off of all available platforms as of recent. You can, however, still find the episode pretty easily online, as well as purchase the DVDs if you really wanted to watch it. What strikes me as odd regarding this episode of The Simpsons is why they singled out this particular episode to get banned. Because this character that's supposed to represent Michael Jackson can be found in many other episodes of the franchise, but those episodes remain online for anyone to find. So it's weird that Stark Raving Dad of all episodes is the only one that is banned, when its premise is much more of a lighthearted story than any of the other Simpsons episodes. Many believe that it's the only banned MJ episode because of how involved Mr. Jackson was with this particular one, having written one of the main songs for the episode as well as recording a ton of the voice lines. Fun fact before we move on, Michael Jackson and another voice actor collaborated on this episode to bring his character to life. So while Michael Jackson did the regular dialogue parts, he left the actual singing moments up to the other voice actor just because he wanted to fool his family into believing he was not involved in this episode. Turban Cowboy. March 17th, 2013 marks the date of a rather unfortunate coincidence with the show Family Guy. In season 11, an episode titled Turban Cowboy aired. There is one particular scene that got this episode removed and banned. During one of those classic cutaway gags that Family Guy is super infamous for, Peter commits mass murder at a Boston Marathon by plowing his car through all the runners. Almost a month after this episode's air, the Boston Marathon bombings took place, which prompted Fox to completely remove Turban Cowboy from being broadcasted to any platforms at all. This is truly a major unfortunate coincidence that I don't think anyone could have seen coming, and to add fuel to the fire, conspiracy theorists began spreading rumors that Family Guy somehow planned the Boston Marathon bombings and used Turban Cowboy as a foreshadowing of those events. Whether that's true or not is up for you to decide. Big Brother Caillou. This is a rather short edition and the last one on this iceberg. In an episode of Caillou titled Big Brother Caillou, there is a short scene in which Caillou pinches the cheeks of his little sister Rosie. He pinches them super hard, which obviously hurts the baby and makes her cry a ton. Now, producers believe this scene to be way too violent for younger audiences, so they decided to cut the scene altogether from future airings. And in some areas, the episode was just flat out banned. To me, this seemed counterproductive, as I took this scene as an example of what not to do with younger siblings, but I guess that point just flew over the heads of whoever brought the hammer down on this episode. That brings us to the end of today's video. The next part for this should be a lot longer, and depending on how much writing I can get done, it may just end up being a 2-part series. If you enjoyed today's video and are new to the channel, feel free to check out my other Iceberg videos. I will leave a link to a playlist below. Now, before I leave you all to go about your day, I wanted to give you all a quick update on the status of my channel as of late. You've probably noticed that I have a lot of infrequent uploads, as well as a ton of indecisiveness when it comes to what video I'm going to do next. I even just put out a community post saying that my next video was going to be about the history of streaming services, and obviously that's not what my next video was about. This is mostly just because I've been losing motivation lately, and I fell into a place last month where I felt stuck doing these Iceberg videos, and I just kind of didn't want to do them anymore. I can say with complete confidence that as of late, I will continue doing these videos, and honestly, doing this particular Iceberg and researching this one has given me a ton of motivation to finish off my other series. I plan on just finishing up the other Iceberg series this month before doing any other videos on my channel, because I feel super guilty making everybody wait for them to be finished. I also got into this trap where the longer I waited, the more I just didn't want to do it, because I kept comparing myself to other Iceberg YouTubers who seem to just pump out icebergs with no issue. And I kept telling myself, like, why am I doing this if I'm not as fast as everyone else, and just basically getting in my head. After a month of working through my issues, I'm honestly just happy to be back. I really appreciate all of you for helping me reach 100,000 subscribers. I really didn't think I was going to get there, especially this fast, so be on the lookout for another video regarding that milestone. And with all of that said, hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.